Hello and welcome to Beyond the Dollar. I'm Andy Hodges and this is Etienne Prime broadcasting to you from our studios here in Harare, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has a new currency, the ZiG, or Zimbabwe Gold. On Friday, the 5th of April, the new Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor, Dr. John Mushayavanu, announced his maiden monetary policy statement, launching the country's new currency, the ZiG, in a bid to mitigate exchange rate volatility and foster stability. The monetary policy statement was further expected and anticipated by the markets to put in place measures to deliver macroeconomic stability in Zimbabwe. So, what is ZiG? Well, ZiG is a type of structured currency backed by reserves. Let me look at the numbers. Approximately $285 million is being held by the central bank. That's over 2,500 kilograms of gold worth about $185 million US, and foreign currency sitting in nostro accounts of about $100 million US. And of course, there is an assortment of other precious minerals such as diamonds and platinum. The governor also recalibrated interest rates, reducing them to 20%, instructed banks to pay higher interest on savings accounts and also to not charge service fees and commissions on FCA balances under $100 US. These were also amongst a raft of other measures contained in the monetary policy statement. So the question is, will the ZiG stabilize the exchange rate? Will the introduction of ZiG stabilize prices of goods and services? If so, how? Will the latest MPS create macroeconomic stability in Zimbabwe? Will the market accept the new currency and support the Reserve Bank's interventions? Zimbabwe has numerous times before introduced a new currency with limited success. Will the ZiG be different? How will the monetary policy deal with inflation, or will it? What other measures need to be taken, especially by central government and other economic players, for the latest monetary policy statement intervention to succeed? To answer these questions and more, it's my pleasure to welcome, and I'm joined by the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Dr. John Mushayavanu. Join me for the intimate conversation with the RBZ Governor and business. Don't go away. Beyond the Dollar. We'll be right back.
From the comfort of your home and wherever you may be, getting in touch with Nyaradzo has never been easier. Just scan the QR code or WhatsApp hi to Sawi on 0712-992-892. Hi, Sawi is available 24/7, 365 days. Nyaradzo Life Assurance Company. Convenience redefined.
Welcome back. You're watching Beyond the Dollar. I'm Andy Hodges, and this is Etienne Prime. This is an intimate conversation with the RBZ Governor and business. Now, to our viewers, we'd like to hear from you. This is your opportunity. You can send your questions or comments to our social media platforms, our Facebook page, Zim Papers TV Network, and our other social media platforms I handle at ZTN Prime. Time permitting, if you send me your questions, we should be able to try and cover as many of them as we can and ask specifically directly to the governor. I also have business representatives here with me in the studio, and I will be, towards the end of Beyond the Dollar, be opening up the floor to questions from them and, of course, from you. So please keep your questions and comments coming through here at ZTN Prime. We appreciate you watching us and viewing us. I welcome ZTN Prime, the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Dr. John Mushayavanu. Sir, welcome to Beyond the Dollar.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, and good afternoon, viewers.
Governor, you came into office at a time that analysts have described as an almost perfect storm. You had the local currency taking a beating, depreciating 70% in over 3 months. Confidence, to be frank, at its lowest ebb. Prices of goods and services risen sharply, some actually say beyond the reach of many citizens. Many citizens not banking, using pillow banks to keep all their money under due to the fact of some of the issues to do with banks and what they pay. The second largest informal economy in the world exists in Zimbabwe. Citizens still having to use the parallel market to source currency. Inflationary pressures building up. Now, I put all of those issues there, Governor, but what is your assessment of the Zimbabwean economy in general?
Yeah, and you are very right in your assessment of the economy. We were operating in a highly inflationary environment. The exchange rate has not been stable. Prices are going up all the time. And so we decided that we needed to put a stop to that. And this is why we came up with that monetary policy statement.
So, yeah, okay, but what's ironic, I think, is that when you look at other portions of the economy, they're performing. You look at mining, you look at tourism as good sectors, agriculture even, apart from, of course, the unfortunate El Nino drought that's come in. So you've almost got this disconnect between a functioning economy, which is actually performing, but when you now break it down to individual citizens and what's happening in the transactional economy, that seems to be where an issue is, or a stumbling block is, so to speak.
Yeah, indeed, we have an economy which is growing in a hyperinflationary environment, a bit unusual. But some of the issues that have caused the instability in the exchange rate, for example, are to do with behavioral attitudes of people wanting to buy the US dollar as a store of value at whatever cost. And this is why we are in the situation that we are in.
So, well, then let's try and translate that into ZiG. You say people wanting to buy the Zim dollar at whatever cost. So how can ZiG possibly stop that? How can it make me say, I don't want to buy the dollar for a store of value? How can it make me say, how can it make goods and prices of goods and services remain stable at least? How will ZiG achieve that?
Yeah. First and foremost, let me give you the definition of a structured currency. A structured currency is a currency that is anchored on reserves. That can also include gold. In the case of our structured currency, which is the ZiG, it is anchored on gold, on precious metals, and on foreign exchange balances that we have in our nostro accounts as the central bank. That in itself means that ZiG is going to be a stable currency. ZiG is going to be a strong currency. If you have seen what has happened over the past 3 days, ZiG has actually been strengthening. Why? Because the price of gold has been going up. And the main anchor of ZiG is gold. So if you are holding on to a currency which is strong, which is stable, you will use it as a savings instrument, and there will be no need for you to go to the parallel market to buy US dollars, because you already have a currency in which you can sell.
That's assuming the price of gold continues going up, sir.
Even if it goes up, gold is not the only commodity in the basket of reserves that we have. We have gold, we have platinum, we have cash in the form of US dollars. And as the central bank, we have the liberty to change the composition and the weighting of that basket.
But that obviously implies then that Zimbabwean citizens must stop thinking of US dollars as a store of value, because what would happen is they'll get their ZiG, they'll rush onto the parallel market and buy US, still thinking that same thought, which of course will then drive the parallel market price up, which can have an impact on prices of goods and services. It's almost like a vicious circle.
Yeah, they should stop that. And if they don't believe it, a time will come when everyone will be hunting for ZiG. And that's when they will realize that it's better to accumulate ZiG as you go.
ZiG has value. Now, I want to talk about the theme of your monetary policy statement. It was back to basics, recalibrating the monetary policy framework to anchor currency, exchange rate, and price stability. The importance of that to Zimbabwe's macro economy. And also, can you explain what you meant by recalibration?
Yeah. When we say back to basics, we are saying let's not think too much outside the box. Let's go back to what it is that makes a currency strong. Let's go back to what it is that stops inflation. And that is what we are trying to achieve in that monetary policy statement.
You say that, sir, but we have many times in the past decade introduced new currencies. If I'm not mistaken, I may be wrong, this could be our fourth time that we're bringing in a new currency. And I think I can say with confidence we've had limited success in the introduction of those currencies. So I suppose, why do you think one ZiG will achieve it? You're talking about the reserves, but also why bring in a new currency? Why not just use the existing Zimbabwe dollar, which people knew, they already were sort of using, at least they knew what it was and they at least could see it, they had feeling it. Why not just use that and tweak around with that and back the Zimbabwe dollar currency rather than bring in a brand new one?
Well, we are bringing in a new concept in the form of a currency which is backed by reserves. RTGS bond notes were not backed by any reserves. And this is why they were behaving the way they were behaving. So we decided that we have to bring in a new currency which has a new basis for exchange rate determination. And I did explain in the monetary policy statement that the exchange rate for the ZiG is going to be determined by the basket of commodities that is anchoring it. And over and above that, it's also going to be determined by the market. We had a situation where, as I said earlier, ZiG, RTGS bond notes were not backed by anything. So we cannot link ZiG to the old RTGS. It's a different currency altogether.
Was there not the time when Afreximbank backed the currency? Didn't Afreximbank put in a line of credit to back the currency? I'm not sure if it was a bond note. That was what I believe the governor said at that time.
Yes, you are right. It was backed up to a certain amount, and then they exceeded it.
Okay. So that is the growth.
Yeah. In our case, we have said any further increase in the amount of money in circulation can only happen if we have the reserves.
That means, though, that you're fundamentally calling for extreme discipline in the marketplace, particularly from all economic players, whether it be government, making sure it controls its spending, whether it be private sector, making sure that they're not just profiteering to profiteer just to make money, whether it be citizens who obviously act responsibly. This is what you're calling. You're talking about an ecosystem that all has to play their part for this to work. Is that what you're basically saying?
Absolutely.
So, but what would you see then as what needs to be done, for example, in some of these things? Like, for example, let's take the value chains. Like, everyone tells us that we have a very badly structured marketplace. In other words, our value chains also don't work very well. We've also got, of course, the attitude, as you said, of people wanting to immediately convert into foreign currency to create value. What would you, as the governor of the central bank, expect to see economic players doing so that they can back the monetary policy rate, they can back ZiG and make this work? Because, frankly, it has to work, Governor.
Yeah, as the central bank governor, I cannot force them to change their behavior. But the fundamentals of ZiG will force them to change their behavior. What do I mean by that? If anyone wants to bet against ZiG and sell it to the central bank, who buy it? We can buy all of it. We have enough reserves to buy all the ZiG.
That's 80 million.
But you will be aware that there are certain measures that we announced in the monetary policy statement that we agreed with Treasury, that come the June QPD, companies are going to be required to pay 50% of their QPD obligations in ZiG.
So they're going to have to find
So
it.
they are going to have to look for ZiG.
Yeah.
And here's the maths. The current ZiG in circulation in this economy is equivalent to just under 80 million US dollars. Treasury, on a quarterly basis, collects plus or minus 300 million US dollars in US dollars. 50% of that is $150 million. There isn't enough ZiG in the whole country to meet that 50%. So ZiG is going to be valuable whether you like it or not.
So what will companies do? I mean, where are they going to get the balance?
They have to come to the central bank.
They have to sell to you for you to release ZiG, but then, of course, then you use that currency as reserves to back it, which means that you can issue.
Absolutely.
Okay. There was a little bit of confusion, I think, Governor. You held up the notes, the ZiG notes, on the 5th of April, showing us what the ZiG notes look like. And it was assumed by most people that they were going to be in circulation on Monday, the 8th of April. And then, of course, the announcement was made that they will only be released into the market at the end of April. Now, analysts say that, when I was speaking to some analysts today, they said that this hopefully well, it could be perceived as confusion of the ZiG launch of the ZiG currency by the marketplace. Your comment on that, and also what informed your decision to delay releasing the notes and coins of ZiG into the marketplace?
Yeah, there is no confusion whatsoever. One thing that you should know is that there are steps to be taken when you are introducing a new currency. The first step was to come up with the statutory instrument that brought into life ZiG. That statutory instrument was issued exactly 2 minutes after I started presenting the monetary policy.
I got it, yeah. I got it 2 minutes after, yeah.
It was all planned that way.
Okay.
The next thing that then happens before you can avail that money in the market is that you must go on an intensive education campaign. People out there in the rural areas, they must know the features of ZiG. They must know exactly what nominations it comes in. Extensive education campaign. Why are we doing that? Because some unscrupulous people can go with a printed bond paper and buy a cow in Berengwa. And the old woman, old men out there will not know the difference between a real ZiG and a fake ZiG. So we have given ourselves the period between now and 30 April to educate the market on ZiG. And only after that, when everyone knows what ZiG looks like, will we release it into the market.
One thing that we were looking at here at ZTN Prime was to see whether retailers or even downtown shops were pricing upward ZiG. So if it came to 1 ZiG 86, they put it up to 2 ZiG, or even when they go to rural areas, even bumping it up even more because, of course, as you said, lack of knowledge. Are you keeping it? Does the Reserve Bank keep an eye on such things to make sure that there isn't this unscrupulous behavior? Because that can happen, of course. Now, of course, again, is pushing up prices of goods and services unnecessarily.
Yes, through FIU, we are doing our surveys and we are warning people accordingly. And especially between now and the 30th of April, when there is no physical ZiG, you can split ZiG to the nearest 5 decimal places in a shop. So there is no reason to round up because people are swiping.
That's just profiteering. Right?
That's just profiteering.
Let's call it what it is, trying to make money.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's interesting because, but what we've also noticed in the marketplace is banks, platforms, money platforms, even mobile money platforms. They seem to be a little bit behind catching up. It's very hard to do transactions. It was for a while you couldn't buy any airtime or bundles or even transact at shops. Banks were down. I think some still are. How are you managing that process? Because that also is important for citizens to have confidence.
Yes, you are right, and that is very important. And we are urging our bankers to speed up the process of conversion. But banks are using core banking systems, which have been provided by different vendors. Some vendors were quick to convert. Others did not even get their conversion scripts until as late as Saturday evening. So we have allowed banks to continue the conversion process, but obviously we need to ensure that before the end of this week, every bank is online and customers are supposed to transact normally.
Governor, I want to talk to you about something which is, it's hard to define, hard to see, hard to touch, but it's so critical, and that's confidence. There has been a lack of confidence in monetary interventions, a lack of confidence in some of the pronouncements made by the central bank, by authorities, particularly when it applies to Zimbabwe dollar, and I'm hoping not to the ZiG, because obviously that confidence or lack of confidence can translate. Also, as I said, a lack of confidence in the central bank itself. Do you acknowledge this, that this is a true statement or not? And if so, what would be your plans to try and rebuild that confidence, to try and put that confidence back in Zimbabweans so that they know, you know what, if the governor says this, if the Reserve Bank does it, if the government says this, we're going to believe it and we're going to go with it?
Yeah, you have summarized it well. That is what was the situation. There was no confidence whatsoever. I also need to say to you, confidence cannot be legislated. No. We have to earn it at the central bank. We have to walk the talk. I did say when I was presenting the monetary policy statement that I want this to be the last monetary policy statement where I present. Future monetary policy statements must be just 2 paragraphs. to say we are walking the talk. And to make sure that that happens, we have set up an implementation committee at the central bank, which is looking at everything that we said we were going to do in that monetary policy statement and tracking it on a daily, weekly, monthly, half-yearly basis to make sure that everything is happening according to plan. If it is not, we quickly correct it. Only when people see things happening as we stated them in the monetary policy statement will they begin to say, you know what, these people know what they're doing.
He was telling us the truth.
We can believe in them.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I can't go and say to people, you must have confidence. It will never happen. We have to walk the talk.
I mean, you said numerous times in your presentation, not on my watch. I think you were, I took that as a message to everybody to say, we're going to do things properly. Don't come and ask to do anything that is unusual, whether it's printing money or asking for this, ask for that. It isn't going to happen under my watch. Was that the right assessment of that comment?
Yes, that is the right assessment. The problem we have in this market end is that when measures are announced, the next day, you see a queue of people saying, can I be exempt? No. Again, I will repeat, not under my watch. We are all equal. If we are going to surrender 25% of our forex, we will all surrender that.
I laughed at one of the questions. They almost implied that they wanted you to say, if it does happen, I'll resign. But actually, you said, I just said it's not going to happen under my watch, so why should it happen?
It won't happen.
Governor, you did say something, and this, as I said when I was doing the script, I actually said to my team, this is my question. It's about the parallel market. Now, as you know, of course, Zimbabweans are being asked to pay US dollars for rents. You can't use the ZiG at the moment to buy fuel. You have to use US dollars to buy fuel, which means that there needs to be somewhere where citizens who do earn ZiG, or in the old case, Zimbabwe dollars before ZiG, have to try and find a way of converting what they earn to be able to buy those goods or be able to pay it. And you did say that you weren't concerned about the parallel market. As far as you were concerned, it was illegal. And of course, in my brain, I thought, well, that means that most Zimbabweans are doing an illegal act every day because they're going onto the parallel market and buying currency to pay for things like fuel and rent. So how can Zimbabwe citizens, if your landlord won't take ZiG, if your fuel attendant won't take ZiG, where can a Zimbabwean citizen be able to buy currency if they can't buy it from the parallel market, which you yourself have stated is illegal?
Yeah, and you are making one very sweeping assumption that the average Zimbabwean or every Zimbabwean has just got ZiG and nothing else. This economy is 80% dollarized. In fact, some say 85%. And I've said before that if I search the pockets of the people in the audience, I'm likely to find, for every $100, 80 US dollars in real US dollars and 20 US dollars equivalent in local currency. That is the nature of the thing. So unless you are saying the 80% that you have is not enough to pay for your rent, and only the 20% that's ZiG is the one that should pay your rent.
So you're making an assumption there that most Zimbabwean citizens are getting paid a large proportion of their salaries or wages in US dollars?
On average, it's beyond 50%.
Beyond 50%. Okay. All right. Well, it's time for us to take a breather. After the break, I continue my conversation with the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor, Dr. John Mushaivanu. Now, please keep sending your questions and comments through via our social media platforms. And time allowing, we will ask some of your questions directly to the Governor later on in Beyond the Dollar. Don't go away. Beyond the Dollar. We'll be right back.
Asibohabo, ongekoga, ko in the OK Grand Challenge, promotion. It's 9 miles, jumping into
comfort of your home and wherever you may be. Getting in touch with Nyaradzo has never been easier. Just scan the QR code or WhatsApp hi to Sawi on 0712 992 892. Hi. Sawi is available 24/7, 365 days. Nyaradzo Life Assurance Company. Convenience redefined.
Welcome back. You're watching Beyond the Dollar. I'm Andy Hodges, and this is Etienne Prime. This is an intimate conversation with the RBZ Governor and business. I have in the studio with me, of course, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor, Dr. John Mushayivanu. Now, please, as I said, please keep sending your questions and comments through to us via our social media platforms. Our Facebook page is Zim Papers TV Network, and all our other handles on all other social media platforms at ZTN Prime. I will later on in this program of Beyond the Dollar be asking some of your questions directly to the Governor, and we really appreciate you supporting and watching ZTN Prime. Governor, for the first time that I can recall, to be honest, and me and you have been in the banking sector for all our lives, I actually saw with my own eyes the reserves being held at the central bank. I think as you and the old governor took the president of Zimbabwe, Dr. Idi Mnangagwa, for a tour of the reserves. And I think that does give some assurance about the reserves being there today, if I can say that. But where reserves are concerned, it's the issue, of course, of transparency. If you're stating categorically that ZIG will be anchored by these reserves, gold and other precious minerals and metals and cash, obviously, and that you will not issue any more ZIG over and above the reserves you hold, that becomes a critical component of confidence in the new currency ZIG. So that transparency is critical. How are you intending to ensure that transparency between the central bank and the market, if I can call it that, is maintained?
Yeah, first of all, as you said, for the first time in the history of the central bank, we opened up the vaults of the central bank for all to see what it is that we have. And we did that in the presence of His Excellency, the President of Zimbabwe. And we, on that day, said that we have 2.5 tons of gold, which are worth 185 million US dollars as at that date. And we have 100 million US dollars in nostro balances, making a total of $285 million, backing ZIG worth 80 million US dollars. Further to that, in the monetary policy statement and in the statutory instrument that brought about ZIG, we have mentioned that every year, at least once a year, we are going to be audited, and the auditors must confirm how much gold we have, how much other precious metals we have, and how much by way of nostro balances we have to back ZIG. And that is going to be an ongoing process. But even before we go to the point of having the auditors, I think our behavior, the way we manage things, should convince the Zimbabwean public that the reserves are there. When there is more money in circulation and you feel it, you feel it. So you are not going to see that happening. In fact, my fear is that the opposite will happen. We might end up having deflation and we may have to do something. But otherwise...
That is a possibility.
Yeah.
But would you, I mean, initially, would you support or think about possibly quarterly? I know it can be expensive, even if it's just internal audit, quarterly, so that at least you can build up that confidence level. Because if we have to wait until the beginning of next year before when you release your report, you're still thinking, do they have it, don't they have it? I'm not saying you don't, but there can be a thought when it is, when people are not confident.
Randy, it's something that can be done, but I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
As I said, when there is too much money circulating in the economy, you will feel it. And you are not going to feel it. Okay. Because there will not be too much money in circulation.
Governor, I want to now turn to the banking sector. You stated that when you looked at what the monetary policy was meant to achieve and look at, you said basically one sentence. You said the banking sector in Zimbabwe is sound, solid, in good shape. So I don't have to worry about that. That's I think was one of, if I can praise you what you said. But obviously, credit creation in the banking sector, loans and advances, which are critical, of course, for economic growth and lending out to business and to individuals, is important. Now, a lot of lending at the moment is carried out in US dollars. Are you, although, however, seeking to promote lending in ZiG banks? Because, of course, we need to start having ZiG as part of our daily lives, if I can call it that, so that we start building this confidence and appreciate it is our currency and we don't want the US dollar, so to speak. Are you going to push for lending in ZiG or at least moving away from dollars into ZiG? How are you playing that one?
Yeah. Up until now, there was not much lending in local currency because that currency was not stable. If you borrowed that money, what were you going to use it for? People were not accepting it. And as a bank, if you lend that money today when it's got a value, by the time you get to month 2 or month 3, before you've even been paid, that money is worthless.
Yeah.
But now that we have a stable currency, we are encouraging our banks to start lending in local currency. And I actually, in the monetary policy statement, dissuaded or discouraged them from lending too much in US dollars. Because as you know, there is a money creation element when you lend. And if you are lending domestic foreign currency balances, you could end up creating money. So this is the reason why we also upped the statutory reserves for foreign exchange deposits to 20% to try and discourage banks from lending too much in nostro balances and concentrate on lending in ZiG.
But you then hit the same problem. There's only a finite amount of ZiG that you can lend. As you said, $80 million, roughly.
Yeah, but that is a good problem to have. Because if there is any need for quantitative easing, we can always look at it.
Yeah, so it's easy to do. Yeah, I suppose you're right. Now, there was one thing that was interesting to me when you did the monetary policy statement. You said that, of course, you have come from being the head of one of the largest banking groups in Zimbabwe. Then you said, but I now have my governor's hat on. And one of the issues that you pinpointed, of course, was the high fees, commissions, charges that are levied onto Zimbabwean citizens' accounts. And, of course, that is stopping, these are stopping people sort of coming to banks. Interest rates on deposits and also the $100 and so forth. I mean, what was your comment on that? I mean, because it's been a long complaint about bank charges. In fact, if you look at banks' results, banks' balance sheets, banks' profit and loss statements, you see how much money they're making in fees, income and commissions, and in fact making very little on what they should be doing, which is lending. And what is your comment on the whole structure of how banks should be paying more on savings accounts, and of course they should be not charging as high charges as they are to try and stimulate people bringing money into the sector?
Yes, precisely. In the monetary policy statement, we set minimum deposit interest rates. Minimum. That is the minimum that they should pay. And we are encouraging the public at large to go and open savings accounts, investment accounts at these banks, and they will be paid that minimum. People were also not saving because they were not being paid anything. So why would you save? You might as well use your pillow as the bank. So we are trying to encourage banking. We are trying to encourage people to save, and we have set minimum deposit interest that banks must pay. And on bank charges, again, from the time I was announced as incoming governor of the central bank, people would be phoning me to say, when you go in there, make a difference. I'm a farmer from Chendambuya. I've sold my tobacco. I've used some of the money, but I'm left with $100 or equivalent in my account.
It's a lot of money to people, yeah?
Next season, I come back. I was expecting that I will find $120 in my account, but I'm finding minus 100.
Yeah.
What happened to my 100? Now I have to sell another 20 bills just to give the bank. That has to stop. So we introduced that ruling where we said for balances below $100, no bank charges. The banks are going to benefit from that because if you've got 1 million customers and there's $100 in each, that's $100 million.
Yeah. Free money in a way.
Free money.
Almost, yeah.
We're not saying pay interest on it, but we're saying don't don't take it.
Because there's always a minimum deposit amount when you do pay interest. I mean, that's
Yeah.
standard across the sector. So as much as you say pay interest, there obviously has to be consistent balances on your account to earn that interest. Now, bank capitalization, this is an interesting discussion and debate. Some say that the banks in Zimbabwe are undercapitalized. Others say we may have too many banks. We're overbanked in some areas. What are your thoughts or views on bank capitalization in Zimbabwe and the plus, what are we, 17, 18, 19 banks that exist here? Do you think that we're overbanked?
First of all, no, we are not overbanked. I think competition is good. The more banks there are, the more you are going to see banks competing with each other. If I say the minimum interest rate is 2.5%, one bank might say, I'm paying 5%, and that's good for the economy. So I'm not worried about the number of banks in the market. Of course, I would be happy if there was consolidation. Bigger banks are important in an economy because when investors come, they look at the size of your banks. You cannot have a corporate having its balance sheet bigger than the balance sheet of its bank. So again, that is a requirement. But we do have big banks in the country. On capitalization, the current minimum capital is $30 million.
Yeah.
I've looked at the capital adequacy ratios of the banks, and none of the banks are breaching that on a capital of 30 million. So if we increase it to 50 or to 100, this would just be idle capital based on the business that they're underwriting now.
So a boost in business, a boost in economic status of the country will obviously then signify a need to recapitalize the banks at some point. But right now, you believe the capitalization is enough to handle what's happening in our economy?
Yes, obviously the number is not cast in stone.
Yep.
We can review it upwards.
Of course. Yeah, I want to go back to this issue of KYC, which of course is critical. KYC, money laundering, has to happen. It's got to be standard. But you do have all of this money that's floating around in the system. Some estimates put it between $4 and $6 billion US that's sitting out there, which won't find its way into banks because people will say, well, they're going to ask me where did I get it from? And most of it could have been earned in the informal sector without receipts, without anything and so forth. I mean, what do we do about that? Because we can't ignore it. It's out there. It's happening.
Well, and we know that there is an informal sector in this economy, and most of them would not have been banking, but we know the businesses that they are running. KYC simply means that we need to know what business you are in. When you open an account, if you say I'm a vendor at Mbari and I earn $500 a day, that's enough. Then your bank can onboard you. So my encouragement, especially now that we are going to have a stable currency, all that money must come into the banking system. I don't see any reason why. So we would understand if you have been a vendor for the past 10 years and you were earning $500 a day, surely it would not surprise us if you came to the bank with $50,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you can prove it. You can say, I've been a vendor. So you're saying the KYC is really just know your customer, but it isn't going to be this draconian that, where did you get it? Let's call the police. You bring in money in and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That is what I think people may be generally scared of.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, it's time for us to take a breather. After the break, I will continue my conversation with Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor. Please keep your questions, comments coming in via our social media platform, our Facebook page, Zim Papers TV Network, and of course, all our other social media handles at ZTN Prime. We will, hopefully, time permitting, be able to ask your questions directly to the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor. Don't go away. Beyond the Dollar. We'll be right back.
asibohabo ongekho kakho in the OK Grand Challenge Triple Promotion. It's 9 miles. Jumping in the Please leave a message.
Welcome back. You're watching Beyond the Dollar. I'm Andy Hodges, and this is ATM Prime broadcasting to you from our studios here in Harare, Zimbabwe. This is an intimate conversation with the RBZ governor and business. Now, please keep sending through your questions and comments via our social media platforms, our Facebook page, Zim Papers TV Network, and of course, all our other social media handles at ZTN Prime. I, of course, have in the studio with me the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor, Dr. John Mushayavanu. Governor, you indicated, and I think it's been proven, that between 80 and 85% of all local transactions in the economy are being carried out in US dollars, or at least some form of foreign currency. So I'm assuming that there may be an ideal split that you may like to see that, because I think 80, 85% is quite high for an economy for which you're not using your own currency. So that's my first question. The ideal split, and of course, what steps you may take to try and achieve that, because the argument isn't about de-dollarizing. I believe we can't de-dollarize. What we have to do is make people want to use our local currency. And in other words, get that confidence in it, make sure it's stable, make sure it has value and retains value over a period of time. So what are your options to try and convince us, or I won't say make us, convince us that ZiG is really a good currency? I can put it in, I can have my pensions and still have my pension when I retire in 30 years' time and get paid and so forth. Those fears of the past are gone.
Yeah, the strategy is very simple. And first of all, stabilize the currency. And this is what we've done through the introduction of ZiG. The next step, create demand for ZiG. And we have made the first step in getting the government, Treasury, to accept that 50% of QPD payments will be made in ZiG. That on its own will create demand for ZiG. So we should significantly, as we go on, see a shift of people wanting to keep more of ZiG so that they can meet some of these obligations. I did say that we may actually run a situation where we run out of ZiG come the June QPD, and that means we are going to see an increase in the number of people wanting to use ZiG. We are at 85-15. If we can end the year at 70-30, I'll be happy. Then maybe next year 60-40, maybe the year after 50-50. And when you get to 50-50, what it means is that people don't mind.
Yeah, either or.
They will accept anything.
But is there a role to play for things like local authorities, rural district councils, even the government, again, to start making more, receiving more and more ZiG rather than US? Because we've had this tendency of people saying, I want US dollars, but actually, if suddenly councils accepted ZiG, for example, local authorities to pay your rates and bills, that also goes a long way to promoting and giving confidence to the currency, does it not?
It will happen on its own, and once the people see that the currency is value, they will accept it. And also, even if they don't want to accept it, they have an obligation to pay. Come QPD, they will look for it.
And you've made a commitment, and this is an interesting one. You made a commitment because I know that you've shifted the market to a willing buyer, willing seller, because the auction, of course, is dead. That's gone and buried, which is fine. But the willing buyer, willing seller. But at the same time, you're also saying, listen, if you have ZiG, we're very happy to buy it off you and give you US, because one day you're going to want it back. So at least the access to currency is there, because one of the inefficiencies in the foreign exchange market is that only very few banks control most of the currency that's coming into this market. I mean, we know who they are. Yet some other banks get nothing. So as a result, you get this concentration of people wanting currency in certain banks and others. So, but we need the currency to be flowing nicely in the market and being sold. How will you achieve that? If I think back in our days in Treasury and how we did that back in the day, because that is important, isn't it? That free-flowing forex market amongst banks.
Yeah, we realize that problem is there, and how the central bank is going to keep the foreign exchange market liquid is through the 25% surrender. Government has also agreed that 50% of the 25% that surrendered on any given day or in any given week is sold into the market. So basically, you've been a dealer before. And so let's say a company is surrendering $1 million. We put it on the position of the central bank. We broadcast to the banks to say we are selling $1 million, willing seller, willing buyer. We sell it, and they give us ZIG. No money creation, because it's taking ZIG from the market, giving US dollars into the market. And then the remaining 50% will be bought by government. 50% of that 50%
of the 25. 50 of the 25, yeah.
Will be kept at the central bank to boost reserves.
Okay.
So that's how we are going to keep the foreign exchange market liquid.
But it's critical then that treasurers or banks don't take this attitude of let's hold long positions, because I think that could be one of the issues, isn't it? Let's hold long positions rather than sell it through the marketplace, which is why I think back in the day we even had limits on how much you could hold overnight, and if you didn't get rid of it by then, tough.
Well, we are going to be monitoring that. If you come to the central bank to buy currency, we need to know the pipeline of your clients who are going to use that money. So that is going to be monitored on a daily basis.
Because this is not about making profits from foreign exchange dealing. This is about making sure that the currency gets to the right people in the market to create economic growth.
Absolutely.
So current annual inflation rate sitting at 55% year on year. Your MPS set an inflation target of 5% or below by the year end. But inflation targeting has been tried before. In fact, I cannot remember a budget or monetary policy statement at some point that didn't mention some form of inflation targeting. And frankly, if I can be polite, they failed quite miserably to keep those targets. So how can you be so confident, sir, that you can achieve that 5% or below by the end of 2024? Because we're only talking about, what, 7-8 months away, and we also know how inflation works, particularly with lag inflation coming in. How are you going to achieve that 5%?
Okay, here's the thing. The simple definition of inflation is the rate at which prices are changing. If you have a strong ZIG, which, by the way, is appreciating, you may want to know that from the day we launched ZIG to today, it has appreciated.
143, I think.
So what my fear actually is that we could be faced with deflation as opposed to inflation.
That is a worry.
Why would anyone increase prices in a currency which is strengthening?
The prices should come down, technically. And that is where that is a danger. Because that's what people don't understand. Deflation is equally as bad as inflation sometimes. In fact, some inflation is pretty good. It shows that there's growth in the economy. You reiterated, of course, that following that the government's lead, that the multi-currency regime is here to stay until 2030, which was important to give confidence to the market, particularly when it came to long-term lending from banks. So that was one of the issues. They would give short-term loans, 1-year loans, and of course, business needs sometimes 5, 6, 7, 10-year loans. So how important is keeping that multi-currency regime 2030? How important is it to Zimbabwe's strategy around the currency?
Yeah, as you can see, it has made it easy for us to introduce ZIG, in the sense that we were only looking at taming the 15 or 20% that was there. So it became very easy for us, because all these problems that we're having in the country were being caused by $80 million worth of local currency. So now we have addressed that, because we have the other 80%, which was already in foreign currency. So we then want to say, that's where we are now. We are fully covered. But as we go forward, let's now start increasing the portion of local currency that's comprising the total amount in circulation and the total transactions that are being transacted.
Now, there was one thing which I'd like to get to understand why you did this. You recalibrated interest rates. You lowered interest rates down to 20%. I mean, they were up as high as 100 and 140, 130. And now, but there's a high inflation environment. There is a high inflation environment globally. It's not just Zimbabwe that's suffering from inflationary pressures. It's global. And in fact, very few countries are lowering interest rates. In fact, most of them are raising interest rates. So in a way, conventional wisdom says that what you did is not the right thing to do. Why did you lower interest rates? What was the reasoning behind that?
Interest rates are also based on inflation targeting. If we are targeting that will end the year at between 2 and 5% inflation, for reasons that we have just discussed, then it follows that interest rates should also fall. And we have done our studies, we've come up with an appropriate yield curve based on the scenario that we are seeing right now. But if we got it wrong, assuming that we got it wrong, which is very unlikely, the Monetary Policy Committee meets every quarter. We can always look at it and review.
But I suppose there is a way of calculating. If you're charging 130 on Zim dollars, and of course the ZiG is actually stronger than the Zim dollar, obviously then interest rates would naturally fall if you want to lend ZiG. You'd never lend ZiG at 130%. That would be, it doesn't
That
compute.
would be madness.
Yeah, it would be madness. Right, anyway, it's time for us to take a breather. Now, after the break, it's the time that you have been waiting for. It's a question and answer session with the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor. We have some business executives here with us in the studio. We'll be taking some questions from them. And I do already have some of your questions coming through via our social media platforms. And I thank you so much for that and giving us your time to ask questions. And I will try and answer or ask the governor as many of them as I possibly can. But anyway, it's time for us to take a breather. Don't go away. Beyond the dollar. We'll be right back.
Promotion. It's jumping
From the comfort of your home and wherever you may be, getting in touch with Nyaradzo has never been easier. Just scan the QR code or WhatsApp hi to Sawi on 0712 992 892. Hi. Sawi is available 24/7, 365 days. Nyaradzo Life Assurance Company. Convenience redefined.
Welcome back. You're watching Beyond the Dollar. I'm Andy Hodges, and this is Etienne Prime. This is an intimate conversation with the RBZ Governor and business. We now move to our question and answer session. Now, as I promised you, we will be taking your questions and we'll be asking directly the Governor. And I thank you very much on behalf of Etienne Prime for you watching us and also sending us your questions and comments. They are very important to us. Right then, Governor, let's take some of the questions. Now, I keep talking about the parallel market rate, and there's a very interesting question here from Boss Mook. I hope I said that. Hi, Boss Mook. Governor, he says, hi, Andy. The ZiG already is now being transferred at a rate of 18 by the black market. What is being done to get rid of these criminals? Can't the law be imposed to jail for 6 months anyone found dealing on the black market? So the black market has jumped in already to try and make money out of ZiG, sir.
Yeah, I don't understand why anyone would go to the black market when we have said, if you have a legitimate foreign currency obligation to pay, be it a service, be it school fees, university outside the country, be it import of goods, you will be able to get your money at your bank on a willing seller.
What about
willing
money
buyer.
for petrol, money for rent? I'm still getting around to that because the fact is that I need to put petrol in my car. And you did say that maybe all of us have US dollars in our pocket, but maybe some of us don't. What do we do about those that don't? We can't be left behind.
Yeah, as I said, we are in a multi-currency environment. And on average, it is expected that if you are going to want to buy dollars from someone, there must be someone wanting ZiG from you. Mm-hmm. So, but why should you part with your ZiG at a premium to someone who has a dollar when you know the true value of the ZiG?
Okay. Yeah. All right, no, I'm just interested because it is interesting because I know there are citizens that do have ZiG or only Zim dollars and they may need to settle some of their payments in US dollars. And of course, unfortunately, it may be that they have to. And I think that is where the dilemma comes.
Very soon, the opposite is going to happen. As I told you, when we get towards QPT, people who are holding ZiG are the ones who are going to be controlling the price.
I look forward to that day, Governor, to be frank, because these guys on the street seem to control most of our life. Now then, I am joined now by Eben Mabunda. I did promise you that we had some top executives from various companies here with us in the audience to ask the Governor directly some questions. They will identify themselves and their companies and ask the questions. So let me cross across to Eben Mabunda. Eben.
We have executives that we've got in the studio. They're just going to introduce themselves and their capacities, and they will be, of course, ensued by a set of questions from this particular panel.
So,
good afternoon, viewers. I'm with the Governor. I'm the Executive Assistant to the Governor.
Good afternoon, viewers. Well, I'm one of Andy's
bosses.
Well, I'm CEO of Zimbabwe Newspapers.
Good afternoon, viewers. My name is Travis Pagine. I'm the Group Chief Executive of BC Holdings. Good afternoon, viewers. Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Brian Makabarara. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Harman Funds and African Trust. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. I think we have to check out the microphone, so just give us a second, please, to my audience in the studio. I apologize for that. But, Governor, let's talk about this. Good afternoon, Sir Hodges. Thank you. From Dixon Chisanu. Thank you, Sir Hodges, he says. Across the borders, will ZiG be acceptable?
Okay, here is my answer to this. Is Kwacha accepted here?
No. Well, maybe, hopefully, for settlement from trade one day, if we can get that done, but otherwise, no.
ZiG is a new currency. It's convertible, but it will take time for especially our neighbors to appreciate the fact that it is convertible. And once they are convinced, you start by seeing people in Musina wanting to take ZiG and the opposite happening for Rand coming this way. So it's coming, but it's not something that we force on the market. It happens on its own.
And of course, we're only talking, what are we now, 11 days into ZiG. Yeah. I mean, we can't be talking about things like that without having given it some time and some traction. Governor Owen Chikara. Owen, thank you for your question. Will the governor be able to withstand political pressure to act in accordance with principle? Mildred Chari published audit reports that were always ignored. How much buy-in does the governor have from the political fraternity?
Yeah. One thing I would like to assure Zimbabweans is that by statute, the central bank is an independent central bank. Early in the morning, people were saying, oh, the government will come and borrow from you. When you go to the relationship between government and its banker, central bank, is exactly the same relationship that a corporate has with its banker. And I have not seen or heard of a corporate who will go and demand to borrow from his banker. The banker will lend based on is the need there and is there a source of repayment.
In your case, the law as well.
And what I can tell you is that the central bank has not lent money to government for as long as I can remember. I checked when I took over. I also went through the books to say I'm hearing that the central bank dips its hands into the coffers of the central bank. Can I see? There's nothing of that sort.
So this is a rumor, misconception that the Reserve Bank is the piggy bank of government. That was not the case, and you proved that yourself with your own eyes in your own investigation.
Yeah. So we are independent, and you will see it.
Okay, well, we'll hold you to that, Governor. Now then, I think that we have sorted out the microphone. I'd like just my final guest in the studio to just introduce himself. I believe that the microphone is working.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. My name is Tendai Kanjanda from Nyaradzo. I'm the Group Finance Director.
Excellent, thank you. Now, I think we're able to now take a question from our audience, if anyone has a question for us, for the Governor.
Once again, good afternoon, Governor. Formally, just to say congratulations on your new appointment, and again to say congratulations on your monetary policy, which was very courageous and bold. And personally, I believe that Zimbabwe needed or needs that kind of boldness. I'm here to proffer support for your monetary policy, and I think when you look deep down, most Zimbabweans are looking for a solution. And one of the contributions I would like to make, Governor, it's partly a contribution and partly a question, is that in most of our businesses that we run, we deal with the ordinary person. And I'm sure what I'm going to discuss is going to help answer some of Andy's questions, whereby the Reserve Bank has already got institutions that it regulates, specifically the Bureau de Changes, that are directly under the Reserve Bank, that the Reserve Bank can use in terms of, particularly in this instance, the conversion of money, the building of confidence. There is no question that the confidence levels are low, they are down. And one of the things that I would like to suggest to you, wearing my other hat of one of the entities that we run, is that why can't we urgently capacitate Bureau de Changes? They have got a much wider branch network currently, because you find that some of the supermarkets which have got 60 plus branches have got Bureau de Change licenses, whereby we can tap into this informal market where we are saying there's a lot of currency in that informal market. And I'm confident in what you are saying, in that there's going to be demand for ZiG. That foreign currency needs to find a home. And for those people, the easiest, closest home for them is to go to a Bureau de Change, is to go to a place that is familiar with them, to go to a supermarket where they can exchange the US dollars and get ZiG. And vice versa. If they want to buy US dollars, our ordinary people must be able to do that, obviously with limitations. I think before we used to have a limit of something like 500 US dollars, where you can change the money without any questions being asked. This covers, I think, the issues that were being asked by Andy, to say if you've got rent to pay, if you've got your fuel bills to pay, and you don't have the US dollar, but you've got the ZiG, then you can go to a Bureau de Change. Let's decriminalize our people. let them have easy access without questions being asked, with certain limitations, where they can go to a bureau de change. Secondly, and supporting bureau de changes, may I also encourage the Reserve Bank to allow us to get away from the traditional methods, with time, obviously, of saying if you want to do any foreign currency exchange at that level, it must be physical. You know, where somebody must see you on a camera and you must exchange money. Let's encourage bureau de changes to use digital platforms, which again helps us in formalizing our various currencies that we're dealing with, whereby if somebody comes in with the US dollars, I don't necessarily have to have, if I'm a bureau de change, have to have cash notes, which we're trying to get away from, but I can transfer that money into a digital wallet, which is like an EcoCash or an FBC account. I can transfer that money into their account. We are bringing that money into a formal market, and it has a digital footprint, which helps us in the future.
Governor, you heard that, using the bureaus to try and satisfy that requirement of citizens who need a little bit of currency here and there. Is that doable? Is it something to consider?
Yeah, those are very good suggestions that we can build upon. We need to digest them, but I take note.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, before I go back to my studio audience, Governor, this is from Mike Murenzvi. Mike, thank you for your question. How does the GBDT balance of plus or minus 950 kgs factor into the 2.5 tons of gold reserves?
That is over and above.
It's over and above the 2.5?
Yeah.
So if you add that in, it's almost over three and a half, 4 tons, almost 3 tons, no, 4 tons almost.
You can't add that in,
Can't add
because
it in.
that is now gold that's in people's pockets.
Yeah.
It's no
So
longer-
only when it's sold to Fidelity, comes into your hands, then
yeah,
then it
because-
becomes part of reserves. Until then,
Yeah, because
it's
when
just
we
that.
sold the tokens and the gold coins to the people,
Yeah.
we gave them the gold.
Exactly. So what they're doing with it, got you. Take sure Chimenya. Some are already selling US dollars on the parallel market at a rate of 17 ZiG to 1. Yeah, okay, similar question. Take sure Chimenya. We asked that question. I think someone had actually said someone was selling at 18, was selling ZiG at 18 to 1. Again, it's about reversing the trend. I think the governor stated that as ZiG gets more accepted, it'll actually become stronger. You may actually find that those with ZiG are the ones the US dollar dealers are chasing, Governor.
Yeah.
Right, let me just go back to Eben, to our studio audience. Eben?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Andy. Please, can you just comment on the narrative that as long as fuel and passport office is predominantly in USD, then the confidence will actually be reduced? Thank you.
Okay. I go back to what I said earlier on. We have 80% of our money in circulation in US dollars and only 20 or 15% in local currency. So if we are going to concentrate all the ZiG transactions and everything on fuel and leave the other 80% untouched, aren't we putting pressure on the ZiG part of the country's balance sheet? We are saying, as we go towards the year 2030, right now we are on 80, 85, 15, maybe minus fuel. Maybe when we get to 60, 40 plus fuel, so that we don't put pressure on the ZiG.
Yep. Is there any more questions from our audience members? Okay, well, it'll be while our audience, while they get their questions together, let me ask this, Governor. There was a comment you made. This is from Tariro Musonza. Tariro, thank you for your question. There was a comment you made in the monetary policy statement about the gold tokens and gold coins, ZiG and so forth. They are still investment tokens. So the question is good afternoon, Sir Hodges. Where's this Sir Hodges coming from? Is the gold for gold coins and the gold backing ZiG the same? I think you did clarify that. Maybe you could re-explain for
Yeah, I've answered that. First of all, the gold for gold coins, once the coin is minted and given to you, you are holding the gold in your pocket or wherever you are keeping it. The gold for the gold-backed digital tokens, obviously we are keeping it for you, and we are giving you a token to say, out of the bar of gold which we have at the central bank, you have so many ounces yourself.
So with those reserves in your vault, you know that that is mine, that's our reserves to back it, but then there's this portion here which were not reserves, which is all about what you bought. So you can assure the citizens who bought that gold that it's sitting there at the Reserve Bank for them, if they ever wanted to redeem it, you know that that's a fact.
Yeah, if someone wanted to redeem their gold-backed digital token, if they wanted gold, I don't know why they would want gold, we could give them. If they wanted US dollars, we'll give them. And there is evidence that those who have redeemed have been paid in US dollars.
Governor, I think we're still waiting for some more questions to come through. Is there any more? There's some questions from the studio. Please go ahead with your question, sir.
Thank you, Governor. Governor, being in business and having some colleagues that are in the retail business, namely supermarkets, you find that they are mostly not in control of their pricing structure.
All right.
Because they are price takers. They get their prices from suppliers. And what you're finding...
sorry, I have to jump in there. Unfortunately, we are having some communication issues. I do apologize to my audience. We're trying to fix that out. But I think you got the gist of the question there, Governor. You think you can answer from there, or in terms of price takers, price makers, particularly when it comes to the various sectors that operate in our marketplace?
Yeah, maybe he hadn't quite finished asking.
Well, I'm not sure. Well, let's see if I can get the question. Please. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll tell you what. While I sort out the comms issues, let's take a breather. After the break, we'll continue our question and answer session with the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor, Dr. John Mushaivanu. Please don't go anywhere beyond the dollar. We'll be right back.
Promotion, Asibo Habo, Ongekoga, go in the OK, Grand Challenge, promotion. It's jumping
From the comfort of your home and wherever you may be, getting in touch with Nyaradzo has never been easier. Just scan the QR code or WhatsApp hi to Sawi on 0712 992 892. Hi. Sawi is available 24/7, 365 days. Nyaradzo Life Assurance Company. Convenience redefined.
How long? What are we talking about? How long? TD? Andy? Yeah, let's go, because you can't keep playing the billboard. Let's go. Welcome back. This is Beyond the Dollar. I'm Andy Hodges, and you're watching ZTN Prime. I'm here with the governor of Zimbabwe's central bank, Dr. John Mushaivanu, and of course, we're now entering what I think is an exciting part of Beyond the Dollar, and that's the question and answer session. Governor, it's interesting. Before the breather there was a question, of course, from one of our members of our audience. And it's interesting. It appears as if the way that prices are being set in supermarkets is following what used to happen under the Zimbabwe dollar. The assumption that suppliers of goods and services are not charging the ZiG, which is around 13.5, just for argument's sake. I think it's down at 13.43, but let's just say 13.5 for argument's sake. They're now selling to supermarkets, and when you go into the supermarket and you do the calculations, it comes out as 18-1. They're almost taking a forward pricing strategy, making this belief or that the ZiG is going to crash and depreciate, because just like any other currency we've had before. I think that is where the 18-1 appears to be coming from. What is your comment on that?
Well, my comment on those prophets of doom is that let's wait for June.
Because that's when the 300 million, and then there'll be no ZiG in the market.
Yeah.
But until then, again, until June comes along, citizens are going to have this confusion. They are going to be overcharged. Prices of goods and services again are going to go up, which again is against what the monetary policy statement was intending to suppress.
Yeah, but I foresee June coming before June, because people have to plan for their QPD. you don't just wake up and say today is June, so where are the ZiG?
People have to start building up the balances.
Yeah.
So you see, because it's only May, June. It's only 2 months, really, isn't it? Right. Let's have a look at some of your. Again, thank you so much for sending through your questions, Patrick Munamato Matenure. Patrick, thank you. I don't understand when the governor says there will be high demand for ZiG. Can you explain why, if the ZiG is the local currency? Okay.
I did explain that come the next QPD, which is June, Treasury have agreed and are going to enforce an arrangement where corporates will have to pay 50% of their tax in ZiG. Treasury collects on average about $300 million a quarter.
Every quarter.
50% of that is 150 million. Currently, as we speak, there is only about $80 million worth of ZiG in circulation. And yet we are going to require 150 million. So for those who are going to be paying tax, they have to buy ZiG from banks represented by those who have ZiG balances but don't want they have no tax obligation. So what is likely to happen is that everyone will be chasing after the ZiG because we don't have it. So the price of ZiG is going to strengthen.
Because ZiG, in essence, is a currency, and the fact is this: it's simple supply and demand. Patrick, obviously, if there's no ZiG in the marketplace, well, then it will appreciate, because obviously everyone will be looking for it. You see my point? Yeah, you need it, but you have lots of US dollars, but not enough ZiG. Of course, you're going to try and get it at whatever price you can, which obviously will strengthen it going forward. Simon Van Nusvi, I hope I pronounced that. Simon, thank you for your question. Can't we buy those essentials like fuel, medication, etc. in ZiG, and the traders can go to the bank to buy US dollars? Why is the governor protecting the US dollars more than the ZiG?
Yeah, let me say this. It is not illegal for a fuel dealer to sell fuel in ZiG.
No.
In fact, if I was a fuel dealer, again, preparing for June, I would sell some of my fuel in ZiG, so that I'm ready for June, and I'm selling it at the correct exchange rate.
So yeah, exactly. That's the key.
Yeah.
The key is that exchange rate, and I think that's what was the fear. The fear is what will retailers, how can they manipulate that exchange rate? And I think that is what citizens are concerned about: going into retail shops, going downtown, wherever they go to buy, and suddenly the guy is pricing it at 18. and really there's no recourse. And I think that's what citizens are. They can't go anywhere to sort this out. They can go to Consumer Council, Consumer Protection Commission, but at the end of the day, they need the goods and services, and they're paying 18. And I think that is just wrong.
Yeah, it is wrong. And I think through FIU, we'll also be investigating that.
I think that's the key. Thank you, Governor. Yeah, definitely FIU need to get involved. Financial Intelligence Unit, they're the section of the central bank that actually goes out and investigates what's happening in the marketplace. And they can actually give some huge, quite large penalties to defaulting or non-compliant companies. So be warned. I think the Governor's warning you. It's a warning. Yeah. Right. I don't know if we have any more questions from our audience. Right. Well, Governor, I think I think there is. All right. How will? Oh, here we go. Here's a good question. It's an interesting one because this has come through before, and it's something I missed. How will commuters survive on the roads with change while they wait for June? Because it is an issue now. Because people have to get home to work. The combis are not accepting Zimbabwe dollars, the old Zimbabwe dollar notes. ZiG is not there yet in its note form. All right. So what can they do? Now they're having to only pay in US dollars. You see the point? That's what the combis and all these other modes of transport will accept.
We issued a statement yesterday to the effect that the old bond note is still legal tender until 30 April. So combis should continue to do what they've always done. I understand these notes were being used mostly for change. You give the combi driver $1, they give you a bundle of bond notes, and the next morning you give them that bundle of bond notes and the transaction is done, the dollar is spent. And that's what we continue doing until the market is ready to receive ZiG and we've fully educated the market on ZiG.
But the reality on the ground, Governor, is that they're not accepting the Zimbabwe dollar. I think the market has already said Zim dollar's gone, no, they're going to accept it, that's it. And in fact, it's happening everywhere. In fact, even in certain shops, they won't accept Zimbabwe dollars either. Downtown, forget it. Combis won't. Some retail, even former retail shops won't accept it. I mean, that is what the market, that's what's happening. The market is dictating.
I don't know why they would do that, because at the end of the day, all those bond notes in circulation, we will take them at the central bank after 30th of April and give value in ZiG. So I don't see any reason why anyone would not accept it.
What about enforcement? Do you think you can work? I mean, I know it's not the central bank's job to go to combis and say pay in ZiG or accept in dollars, but surely working with law enforcement or through the FIU working law enforcement, they can at least do something about it. Because I think at the end of the day, Governor, I think you said it yourself, citizens must be at the heart of everything that we do, monetary policy, everything that you're doing, in fact, is for the betterment of Zimbabwean citizens, stable economy, stable prices. And this is one area that does impact citizens daily. Every day, millions of commuters are having to get onto combis. They're not getting changed. They're not accepting Zimbabwe dollars. They don't have ZiG to pay. They have to get US. I mean, it's becoming a bit of a hassle for citizens.
Yeah, on that, we'll get FIU to talk to the Commuter Omnibus Association so that that message is disseminated and people should be able to use their bond notes to
I think enforcement is critical, Governor, because it's all well and good writing a statement, as you know, but whether I follow the statement or not is up to me, I suppose. Right, Max Korombo, thank you for your question, Max. Good afternoon, Andy. As we have backed our new currency with gold, how can we get international credit to further bolster our new currency? That's the first question. So here we're talking about, obviously, lines of credit, which I'm sure is tied in, of course, to our arrears, which is an issue. Secondly, may the government reconsider the position on making the surrender portions and outstanding balances from the auction tradable securities to alleviate pressure on the working capital base of an already pressurized local business. Okay, and then so let's go with those two questions first. International lines of credit now is back with gold. Sorry, Max Karombo is the CEO, if I'm not... OK Zimbabwe CEO. Actually, this is Max asking the question. So, first question then, international credit lines for the pass to our new currency, and may you reconsider the position on making the surrender portion outstanding balance from the auction tradable securities?
Okay. I think starting on the question to do with external lines of credit, it's really got nothing to do with ZiG being backed by gold. But one hopes that following the area negotiations that are taking place, we'll find a solution, and that will open up space for the country to be able to borrow. And also, one would also want to believe that following the lifting of sanctions by the central bank, it should free international banks to also start having dealings with local banks, and that way lines of credit can be established.
And they are, and of course there are private sector lending lines of credit coming. I think Afrexim Bank, AFDB,
Yes.
European Investment Bank. These lines of credit are still coming into the country, but strictly focused at private sector lending.
right.
What about the issue of outstanding balances from the auction? Because I can understand his point. You're making a tradable security, but actually that they need the working capital, and the tradable security doesn't really help a company very much.
Yeah, on the outstanding auction areas, I think our position has been very clear, and I did say that when we make a law, it's for everyone.
Don't come to my office and ask.
Yeah, you know, my duty is to control the amount of money in circulation, and if I release those NNCDs, I'm actually
You've just
increasing
blown
the
Zig
amount
out
of
the
money in
water.
circulation, and I don't want Zig to end up with the same fate as the Zimbabwe dollar.
Yeah. All right, now he says, may I appeal to the governor, this is again Max Korombo, may I appeal to the governor to review the role of the FIU in an environment of a freely traded exchange rate regime? Interesting. Because now you've changed it to freely traded exchange rate regime. FIU, obviously, their focus changes, doesn't it, to a certain degree?
Yeah, well, I did say in the morning, people were talking about the 10% premium that retailers have to put on the exchange rate. And I was saying, if you have a ZIG which is stable, and if you are a retailer and you put an additional 10% on the exchange rate, you'll be out of the market as far as your prices are concerned. So that one is not an issue. A retailer is not penalized for applying the exchange rate as it is, but is penalized for applying a factor which is beyond 10%.
Yeah.
So really,
And
there's
the
no
profit
problem.
margin is there.
And
It's
so,
not as if you're squeezing them out of business. I mean, you know, they're making the money. I will say this, and thank you, Max Karombo. He's the CEO of OK Zimbabwe. And I'll say this, and thank you so much for this message. He says, I can confirm that OK Zimbabwe is accepting Zimbabwe dollars and ZIG. So at least that's one retailer governor.
thank you.
Thank you, Max. Yeah. Now then, there's a couple more questions before I let you go, Governor. Constantine Anotida Chikumbu. Interesting question. I'm not sure if you can answer this one, but it's a question. Will civil servants get ZIG or US dollars?
I'm not the Public Service Commission. These are the configuration of salaries is the prerogative of the employer and their employees. So I cannot answer on behalf of Public Service Commission.
It's up to the government, basically. Yeah, how they pay civil servants, Public Service Commission. That's not your. As long as the ZIG that's paid still remains backed by reserves and it cannot go above that.
Yes.
Right. Tariro Musonza. Thank you, Tariro, for your question. Limit for Zipit peer-to-peer has been set at 8,000 ZIG, but in some instances people are exceeding that limit. Is the Reserve Bank going to monitor that?
Well,
this is those transaction limits and...
Yes, the banks are supposed to monitor that.
So the banks are supposed to. So obviously here there's some compliance breakdown here. So I suppose that's back to your FIU and your banking regulation to go and check that out. Okay, great. So if they are breaking the rules, it's down to the banks, and the governor said, well, if that's true, obviously they'll pick it up at the central bank and do something about it. Is that correct, Governor? Yeah. Right. Sean Intafara Chingono. Why is it that we still don't have the ZIG in our accounts as we can't buy up to now? I remember I spoke about this earlier. The fact, we did speak about banks, and you basically said, banks, get your act together. Effectively.
There are one or two banks that have had challenges in conversion, but the matter is under control. And I did say that by the time we get into the weekend, we should have all banks online.
And then we can start. I think, guys, Governor, this is something I think is important for citizens to understand, in that just think of if you had the Zim dollar before, you were making payments, transferring, whatever, just put ZIG there. It's just that it's a different value, but it's exactly the same. Yeah. Nothing has changed. So the confusion around ZIG it's basically our currency. It has a value, it has an exchange rate, we know what it is, it's backed by gold, and citizens should be able to use it freely for most of their transactions.
Yes.
That's the bottom line, isn't it?
That's the bottom line.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. Governor, we have to close now, and I know I have to let you go, and it's really been a pleasure having you for so long, sitting down with ZTM Prime. But your hopes, you've just been in office, 11 days in essence. You're brand new, so to speak, in the role. Your hopes and vision, your thoughts going forward. What would you, if you were a central bank governor, if I said to you at the end of your first 5-year term, did you achieve what you wanted to achieve? What would it be?
Well, that role is defined in the Reserve Bank Act. My role is to ensure that there is exchange rate and price stability, a stable currency, and low inflation.
That
is what is on my scorecard. That is what I'm going to be judged on.
This is exactly what the central bank does. Uses interest rates and exchange rates to manage the economy. So
Yes.
get back, as you said, back to basics, sir.
Back to basics.
I'd like to as well, of course, now we have to wrap up. That comes to the end of Beyond the Dollar. But I'd like to, of course, just firstly look at my guests in the audience to see if there's any last questions that any of my guests would like to ask the governor. Well, I would like to thank my guests in the audience. As you can see, we have some big business executives here who are listening intently to the governor. And from the shaking of their heads, they seem to say, you know what, give this a chance. Now, at the end of the day, ZIG is here, and it's here to stay. Will the new currency and interventions work to stabilize the exchange rate and foster in macroeconomic stability? Look, I personally sincerely hope so. To you doubters, give it a chance. Look, it's always easier to be negative than positive. So be positive. Central Bank Governor Dr. John Mushaiwana, thank you, sir, for speaking to ZTM Prime. Most appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much. And change that to Beyond the Zig.
On that note, I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and please, you all be safe. Ciao.
It's 9 jumping into